Happy Friday morning. I am jumping on today to talk about 14 different nutrition and lifestyle strategies that you can implement in order to support healthy levels of the hormone insulin so that you can manage your weight through perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, as well as just create a vibrant life and health for yourself. So if you're just tuning into these episodes, I've been talking about insulin all week long, how we metabolize carbs, what the role of insulin is, what is insulin resistance, why is it something we want to avoid, how do we know if we're at risk. I talked about all of that, and today I'm really going to be digging into some very practical strategies that you can implement. Now, before I jump in, if you are joining me, I would love you to say hello. You can just give me a little wave in the comments. Let me know where you're joining me from. If you are catching the replay, go ahead and just put replay in the comments so that I know who is seeing this. That would be super awesome. I really appreciate that. So if you watched yesterday's episode on the risk factors for developing insulin resistance, then you know that one of the risk factors is just simply being a woman over 40, but there are numerous other risk factors. So if you watch that one, I would love to hear from you right now. Like, do you think this is something you need to be concerned with? Yes or no in the comments, just to let me know, and we're going to dive in. Okay, so generally speaking, I've got my list here so I don't forget anything, right? But generally speaking, when we're talking about insulin resistance, the cause of insulin resistance is high blood glucose, right? Having excessively, chronically high blood glucose. And Jason Fung, he wrote the diabetes code and the obesity code, and he puts it so simply is like, if insulin resistance, if the problem or the cause is too much blood sugar, then the solution is pretty easy. You have to reduce blood sugar, like stop putting excess blood sugar into the body and burn off the stored blood sugar that's being problematic. So those are kind of some of the tips that we're going to start with, right? So first thing you need to do, obviously, is you need to start avoiding the foods that are really high in sugar, or the foods that get converted into glycogen very, very quickly. That's that storage form of sugar. So number one is avoiding high glycemic foods, okay? Everybody should be doing this. Now, I'm not saying you should never eat them, because I am not that kind of a coach. I'm definitely not perfect, but if you could follow like the 80-20 rule would be a good sort of starting point. So 80% of your diet should not be high glycemic, and maybe 20% of your diet you could play around with. So your high glycemic foods are going to be like anything high in sugar. So chocolate, candy, Coke, frappuccinos, all that kind of stuff, refined starch like white bread, pasta, crackers, chips, muffins, pastries, all that stuff, right? And alcohol, because although it's not actually a carb, it does raise blood glucose. So those three things. Again, those types of foods, they get converted into sugar very, very quickly in your body. They get digested and absorbed very quickly, so they spike glucose and they spike insulin. So we want to avoid those foods as much as possible. And then on the flip side of that, we want to start eating more low glycemic foods. And these are the foods that your body digests and absorbs very slowly, right? And so this is going to be, when it comes to carbohydrates, we're looking for things that are high in fiber, basically. Whole foods, right? So you can think of this as like basically any vegetable, any fruit, any kind of whole grain, anything that has been minimally processed that still has lots of fiber in it. All of those are going to be lower glycemic foods. And these are already, like, if you just focus on that, that's going to be like a really great starting point. So basically the message here is really, as much as possible, just start by eating real food. Get rid of the processed crap in your life, and just doing that will be a really good starting point. Fiber, I did a big, fiber is the topic of, inside with my private clients. I have a Facebook group just for them, and fiber was the topic of the month. And so all month long, I was encouraging them to increase their fiber intake. And fiber is such a key nutrient or a key carbohydrate when it comes to managing insulin, because fiber slows down the digestive process. It really slows down absorption, and it helps to stabilize blood sugar levels. And that's what we want. We don't want them chronically high. We don't want them spiking all over the place. We want to keep them just nice and stable. So making sure you're getting lots of fiber. 25 grams a day would be a great starting point. More, maybe even better. So, I would take a look, assess how much fiber you're currently getting. Most women are not getting enough fiber. Most women are sitting at about like 13 to 15 grams, and they need to really focus on upping that. Next up, when it comes to nutrition, again, all in the goal of stabilizing blood glucose levels to avoid those chronically high ones, is protein. We need to be eating more protein. I talk about this all the time, but women should be aiming for approximately 30 grams of protein per meal, 90 grams a day. That would be a great starting point. If you are really insulin resistant and you are having a hard time with weight loss, you may even want to bump that up to 120 grams per day. Okay, so that covers our first four there. So less high glycemic foods, more low glycemic foods, more fiber, more protein. And now, of course, if this is another thing to consider. So yesterday I talked about how you can monitor your own blood glucose, and I showed you that little meter that you can use to check. So just flipping to whole foods like that might be sufficient. If after 30 days you do not see any changes in your blood glucose levels, then you might need to take a slightly more aggressive approach to lowering blood glucose and insulin. Because again, like you can think that, like all of that blood glucose has been jammed into your cells, your fat cells, your liver, your muscles, and we have to get them out, right? We have to use them up. So the other thing that you could do is you could completely eliminate all starch and all fruit for about 30 days. Okay, not even doing it for forever. So this is where you're going a little bit more low carb. So your carbohydrates would basically come from vegetables, but you would kind of get rid of the fruit, you would get rid of the whole grains, you could even get rid of the root vegetables, and just see if that makes a difference. Because for a lot of women, when they do that, they will see a big improvement in their blood sugar management. Now, when you do that, it's important that if you decide to do that, it's important that you also increase your intake of fat, because if you're lowering carbohydrates, you're lowering your caloric intake. Well, you've got to get your calories from somewhere, and they're going to come from fat. So having a low carb, higher fat approach. And I know for some of you that might feel scary, because there's these old belief patterns that fat will make you fat, or that fat is unhealthy. But if you're choosing the right fats, it's actually going to help you. And here's something that you may or may not know, but carbs obviously will spike blood glucose and insulin. Protein will also do that, especially if consumed in excess, which most women do not do. But if consumed in excess, your body can actually take excess protein and convert it into blood sugar, into glycogen. Fat is the only macronutrient of the three that barely has an impact on your insulin. And this is why ketogenic diets are often referred to as helpful for blood sugar management, for lowering insulin, for lowering triglycerides, because you're never raising your blood glucose levels when you're on a ketogenic approach. Okay, next up. So those are sort of like your macronutrients and the kinds of foods that you should be eating. The next tip is try to avoid snacking, right? Because every time you eat, you are going to raise blood glucose and you're going to raise insulin, especially if the foods that you eat contain carbohydrates or protein. But if you avoid snacks, so if you have breakfast and then you have lunch and then you have dinner, you have this in-between period where you actually give your body the opportunity to lower blood glucose and to lower insulin levels. So you give your body that opportunity. But if you have breakfast at 7 and a snack at 10 and lunch at 1 and a snack at 3 and another dinner at 6 and maybe a snack in the evening, you're just like spike, 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 spike. So eliminating snacks. Okay, so that's the next one. Next up, and this one kind of refers to the stress hormone cortisol, but I think it's a really important one to talk about, is eating enough calories. Eating enough calories. And I know that for a lot of women that are potentially watching this, if you are trying to lose weight, there is a good chance that you are also trying to restrict your caloric intake, because that is what we have been told to do for the past 20, 30 years. But caloric restriction is a stressor on the body, and anything that is a stressor on the body is going to increase cortisol. And if you watched what I talked about yesterday, cortisol is a stress hormone, and one of its roles is to raise blood glucose levels. So we really need to manage stress as part of our action plan for managing insulin. So making sure that you are not restricting your calories. You can have a small calorie deficit if you're looking to lose weight, but women who are doing like 1,200 calorie diets day in, day out, that might not work for you, because it might just be too stressful on your body. Okay, next up, also on the topic of nutrition, of what can be helpful, there are different supplements that are known to help with insulin resistance. And I am going to say right now that this is for information only. When it comes to supplements, you must talk to your doctor before you start anything, because there can be contraindications with the meds that you're on right now. So don't just walk into a health food store and start grabbing everything I'm talking about. Again, information only, you must talk to your doctor. But some of the supplements that are known to help with insulin resistance include chromium, alpha lipoic acid, magnesium, biotin, EGCG, which is a green tea leaf extract, and cinnamon. Okay, so those are some of the supplements that you can support. Okay, next up, we're moving more into sort of like lifestyle strategies that you can use. And the first one is to lose weight. And I know, easier said than done. And you're like, okay, thanks, Haley, great tip. But again, if you can get your weight under control, you will naturally find it easier to control your insulin levels. And so you can use all of the nutrition strategies that I gave you and some of the stuff I'm about to give you to help you with that. But really, again, getting that BMI under 29 was the number I gave you yesterday, would be a really good thing to do. Okay. Next up is exercise, movement, right? Because again, as I said at the beginning, the way Jason Fung put it out is pretty easy, right? You've got to stop shoving more sugar in your body, and you've got to burn the excess sugar in your body if you want to manage blood glucose and manage insulin. Exercise is a great way of burning excess sugar in the body, right? And that's what we got to do, because the insulin levels will not lower if there's tons and tons of sugar around, right? So when it comes to exercise, walking is supposed to be the best form of exercise for lowering insulin resistance, as well as anything where you're getting some kind of muscle contraction. So strength training or HIIT training or something like that. Even going for a run is great, but I would prefer you to be walking or doing strength training or just moving around the house. Any kind of movement. It could be like gardening. It can be cleaning the house. We just need to get off our derriere and move around as much as we can. On that note, we don't want to be over-exercising, and this comes back to stress and cortisol. But again, over-exercising, over-training, that can be a stressor on the body, and that can raise cortisol, which again raises blood glucose. So really, it's all about balance here. And that's again why walking, like, it's hard to overdo it. So when in doubt, go for a walk. Okay, what else? So these are, again, lifestyle factors. So stop smoking. If you're a smoker, you got to give it up. It's time to let go. Sleep. Sleep is a really big one. If you do not get a good night's sleep, even one night, you can increase insulin resistance by 33%. So really, sleep is so key. It's part of how our bodies rest and repair and recover. And when we don't get enough sleep, it impacts a whole lot more than the people in the house that have to deal with our bad moods because we're tired, right? So it really has a big impact on our hormones, insulin being one of them. So making sure that you are getting between 7 and 9 hours every night and going to bed ideally before 10:30 latest. Okay, so that's what we want to be doing. Next up is intermittent fasting, and this is a huge topic and one that I'm about to dive into inside my group at 10:30. You're more than welcome to join me. Just put group in the comments and I'll get that link to you. But essentially, like, if you understand again that the reason that we have insulin resistance is because we keep shoving more and more and more and more sugar in our bloodstream, and our body is trying to store. Well, when we eat, we store. When we fast, we burn. Right? So if you're fasting and there's no calories coming in, you're going to burn off the excess sugars that are in your bloodstream and in your cells and in your liver. And so that is a good thing. So intermittent fasting has been proven to improve insulin resistance. I think it's a great lifestyle strategy that is safe for pretty much everyone. There are some exceptions, like women that have a history of eating disorders, probably not the best strategy for you. But for all other women, I think pretty much it's quite safe. The only thing that might get in the way is if you are taking medications, for example, and you have to have them with food, then you'd have to talk to your doctor about that, what that would look like. But fasting, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to be for very long, 12 hours. You will start to see improvements to insulin resistance with just a 12-hour fast overnight, which basically means skip the evening snack and you will probably be there, right? And or you have to push breakfast a little bit, but it's a pretty easy one to do, 12 hours. Like, everybody can do that. Okay, next up is reducing stress. So, I mean, this is overall, I've already talked about that. I've already talked about how the stress hormone cortisol, one of its roles is to elevate blood glucose. And therefore, as I was saying yesterday, you can have the perfect diet and be doing everything that I've listed. But if you are chronically stressed out, you could still develop insulin resistance because of the hormone cortisol. So managing cortisol is just part of managing insulin. It's just what it is. I think that is it. I think that covers it all. So again, lots of different things that you can do to support healthy levels of this hormone insulin, which, as I explained yesterday, is the primary driver of menopause, perimenopause, weight gain. And this happens because we are starting to see a decline in our estrogen levels, and estrogen and insulin are interconnected. So when we lose estrogen, we just become more insulin resistant naturally. So I feel like if you're a woman in your 40s and maybe you haven't even experienced weight gain yet, then these are things that you can start thinking about. These are changes that you can start making now, knowing that you are moving towards insulin resistance, right? And if you are already, sort of later stages of perimenopause, or maybe you're postmenopause and you've already gained the weight and you're like, oh my goodness, I've gained 20 pounds in the past year. I hear this all the time from women that I'm talking to, where it's just like, it just suddenly comes on. There are things that you can do, and really managing that hormone insulin is going to have a really, really big impact for you. Now, if you are looking to get some help with this, then you might want to think about my program. It is called Perimenopause Body Solutions. It's a 14-week program. And in that program, I help women learn how to navigate and support some of the big hormones that are changing. So obviously insulin is one of the big ones, and cortisol. Those are the two kind of biggies that like my whole program was designed to support. But also thyroid and estrogen dominance and ghrelin levels and sarcopenia, or the loss of muscle mass, all these other things that also have an impact. When it comes to insulin specifically, the main habits that I teach women to implement inside the program, because it is an education program, but really it's designed to help women implement and track their consistency. So my approach inside that program is low carb, moderate protein, healthy fats, and high fiber. That's the way I like to define it. And you know, like I said, I'm not a perfectionist. My clients still get to eat bread. They get to drink wine. They get to enjoy a little bit of chocolate. But, you know, for the most part, that is how we are eating. That's what we're doing to really start with nutrition, start with the foods that we're putting in their body. I also teach them about appetite control, right? Like teaching them how to eat the right amount of food without counting calories. And just choosing the right foods will help you do that naturally, right? If you eat foods that are satiating, you won't have to worry about putting everything in MyFitnessPal. I also teach women about intermittent fasting. And I teach them how to do it in a way that supports their hormones, because women have to fast differently than men, and women over 40 have to fast differently than women in their 20s and 30s. It's just because we have different hormonal profiles. And when it comes to fasting, like I said, it is a stressor. And so while fasting is good, too much fasting can be a bad thing. Now, again, you know, as I said, weight loss is going to help with insulin resistance. The women in my program are losing about 10 up to 25 pounds in 90 days. So obviously that has a big impact. And they are losing weight around their belly. So they are losing inches around their belly. And if you remember from yesterday, belly fat is another one of those risk factors. Stress management, super key inside my program. My whole workout program is called the Goldilocks Fat Loss Formula, and it is all about not too much, not too little, but just right. And it was designed to help women manage and support healthy levels of the hormone cortisol, which, like I said, is essential to managing insulin. And then finally, as part of the program, is teaching women how to create a calculated caloric deficit. So nothing that is overly stressful on the body, because again, stress management, so key. So if you think that insulin resistance is one of the reasons that you are starting to put on weight, or you're struggling to lose weight, you know, regardless of what you're doing, and if you feel like you need help implementing these strategies, then definitely reach out to me and we can talk a little bit more about my program, what it looks like, who I designed it for, if it's the right fit for you, if I think that I can help you, all of those things. If that's something you want to do, just send me a private message and we can touch base. I've got a little video I can send you that kind of explains, give you a little gist, show you what it looks like behind the scenes, and help you, because that's what I want to do. I personally, I've made I am committed to really taking care of myself in this phase of my life. As I go into perimenopause and menopause, I know my mom, she suffered with terrible hot flashes. So far I'm good. So far my sister's good. She eats very similar to how I eat. So I do think that our nutrition and lifestyle will have a massive impact on how we experience menopause. So there you have it. That is it for today. Thank you so much for watching and staying with me until the very end. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.